Hello, welcome to All For United WFC. Hello and welcome to All For United with me, John Foster, MUFC, Man United Academy, Under 21 Devs, whatever you call them. Winners again today. But it wasn't just any other game, it was a playoff final, WSL Academy final, playoffs, and it was another win, 6-2 on aggregate. We've got Deborah joining us shortly. She's just on the way home from the game, so hopefully she manages to get here in time to talk a little bit about the game itself and the Devs. We still call them the Devs. And yeah, she can obviously give us a bit of an insight into what's happened this season with the Devs as well, because she's seen a lot of the games. For those of you who doesn't know Deborah, who may not go to the games or who may not be on Twitter or social media too much, she's also the chairperson of the Man United Women's Supporters Club, formerly known as the Barmy Army. So she'll have a lot to say. So looking forward to getting into that. First of all, though, Connor's with me. How you doing, Connor?
Yeah, all good. It's good to see him win another trophy. They are. We're going to get into this, and like I said, when Deborah joins, she'll be able to give more insight than you or I. But it's looking really promising for him, and it wasn't even close by the sounds of it. So another promising one. So that's all good.
We've heard all season and even last season how good our youth team are, and obviously as United supporters we can be biased, but I think we've always praised the likes of Aston Villa and Chelsea, and maybe when Deb comes on, she can give us a bit more of an insight into some of our nearest rivals. But it's not easy to come top of your league after 20 games, get 50 points, a massive goal average, so many goal scorers, and then win the cup that we saw a few weeks ago when we was at St George's Park, win the league since then, and then win the playoff. It's great to see, isn't it?
Yeah, and it sounds really Michael Owen-y to say, but you win games, you win trophies, but trophies boost your confidence, so it's only going to do good things for them. I think there's a few of them now that I think have reached their peak at that level. In terms of what I mean by that, I don't mean they've reached their peak as their ability. I mean at that level, they're probably not going to improve. They need to go elsewhere to improve. So there's a slight difference there. But like I said, trophies boost your confidence. So, these girls will come off the back of that and be like just full of, good emotions going into the summer. How many of those will go on the preseason tour? How many involved in the first team going into next season? It's good for them because, like I said, there's a few of them now that I think have reached that level where it's an important decision they need to make in their career, or obviously United need to make for their careers in terms of what's the next step for them. Because it's great they've won it this season, fantastic, obviously done the double. Next season, if they go and do all of that again, which we hope that they do, some of those players I think need to move to the next level. Otherwise, I think they'll just get stuck in that kind of rotation.
Yeah. I think you said the word confidence. I think they're oozing with confidence now, if I'm honest. You look at the way that they've celebrated, especially some of the players, the way they celebrated at St George's Park. And I've seen the video clips of today and seen some pictures from a couple of weeks ago when they won the league. I think they've got that confidence. And now you are right. We need to somehow keep them happy, keep them at the club, whether it be keep them at the club and send them on loan or something else, or get them in and around our first team, just to make sure that they don't get too disheartened that their season isn't going anywhere. There's a lot of man management to play now to be a part of, because we do need to keep them happy. We need to keep the development going. To me, you've got 2 or 3 choices. You can send them out on loan where they can get game time, whether that be the WSL or the Championship. I think at this stage, the majority of them would be going to Championship level, maybe 1 or 2 lower end WSL. And then you've got, of course, what we have seen quite a lot of, be in the senior team, in and around the matchday squad, training with those, but then appearing on the bench. But you're getting a taste of matchday as a senior team, but you're not actually getting much game time. So I'm not 100% sure if I'm too happy with that, or sell them, or let them go. But and if they prove to be good enough, get them back. Have you got any, like, how would you kind of separate them? Because for me, I would think like your star players now need to go out on loan at the WSL club, because that's the level that they need to be playing at. I think that the middle players need to be going to like the championship, and then the rest obviously keeping in around the club. Maybe do it that way.
Yeah, because ultimately the thing is with that level, you're only going to get really 2, 3, maybe 4 that make it into the first team. Most of them will go out to other clubs, and that's not a failure on their part. If they make it as a professional, that's a success. So wherever they go, like I said, I think there'll only be 2 or 3 that will make it fully into the first team. But yeah, it's, so like you said there, some of them have already been involved in match days. I think it was Reading away. I think Barry and Niamh Murphy were in the squad for that game. I don't think either of them came on, not that I can remember. Obviously, we've seen Conner involved in the first team as well down at Bridgewater. So there's plenty of opportunities there, but it's that next level because it's a whole different ball game. We speak to a lot of players up and down the pyramid when they talk about just their own academies, at tier 2 or tier 3 level, going from that academy to say tier 2 first team. Mm-hmm. It's hard, and it is a big jump. So it's a real tough one because you don't want to stunt these players' growth by keeping them in the same team, involved with the kind of academy setup. You want them to be tested, but at the same time, you don't just want to throw them in the deep end and go. Some players will thrive on that, some won't. It's the sink or swim, obviously, phrase, but it's going to be different for each player. Like I said, some will thrive on just being thrown in the deep end, going, there you go to a WSL club, on loan for a year. Some players will like that comfort of staying in and around Manchester United and just having these experiences in the first team. So it depends on the player, to be honest.
For me, it's there's a couple of watch outs. I think one is the physicality to suddenly start playing adults, experienced adults, week in, week out. I think that's a big thing for some of these players, because don't forget, a lot of them are young and they're not used to that kind of intensity. And another one is playing in front of fans. I think anyone who's been to a Devs game or seen pictures, there's not many fans there whatsoever, and a lot of the fans are quiet. The WSL and women's football in England tend to be fairly quiet anyway, but the Devs is hardly anything. So making that step from that kind of game, football match, to coming into a WSL stadium or even the Championship now, I think is a jump in itself. So I think you do have to judge the individual player. So when I just said how I would kind of do it, I'm kind of contradicting myself now, because some of those top players, they may have all the talent in the world at this level. Well, how are they going to react week in, week out in very tough games and tough atmospheres as well? If we're a Man United fan and we see a young Chelsea player come on, you can guarantee we would try and rattle their players and try and put them off. Maybe down the line, Chelsea fans would do that against some of our young players as well, and that's the way football is. I'm going to put a few of these comments on screen. We've got Ian Lee basically just talking about what we've just been speaking about. Who do we lose to? Who do we lose to Bodge in the bum later? I think it's basically how do we integrate them into the team. We've kind of just discussed that. Sporty Chatterbox is saying, isn't there a dual loan system? Yes, I absolutely love that. We see quite a bit of that in our hometown. So we've got Birmingham, who's a WSL team, who has got 2 young prospects who train with Birmingham, but they also play week in, week out at our local team, Stourbridge. But I appreciate that's a lower tier. But what do you think about that dual contracts, Conor? Because I'm a big fan of it, because you're still being around the club, but you're also getting game time as well, aren't you?
Yeah, it's like an apprenticeship, isn't it? You're getting experience from your provider. I'm trying to compare it the best I can to an apprenticeship. Now I've said that. You're getting, let's say, how an apprenticeship works. You've got your provider, you get your training, but you're also working with a company as well. So you get your work experience from there as well. And that's kind of what these dual contracts are. You're getting your information from your main club, but you're also getting this experience at most of the time a bigger club and a more established club, and getting the game time out there. You mentioned our local side, obviously Stourbridge as well, use that, and a lot of teams in and around Birmingham use it with Birmingham and Villa and West Brom, obviously further up the pyramid than a lot of the other kind of local women's side. So it works. It really does work. It's like I said, you get that experience then. There's some downside to it because some players maybe it goes back to what I said a minute ago. It all depends on the player. Some players are going to love that and thrive off it. Some players won't. It depends on the individual case, and you've got to take it case by case. What works for one player is not going to work for another. You could loan them all out, and only 2 of them are going to work on loan. So it depends on the player. But I'm certainly not against this dual loan system. I think it works very well, certainly in the lower tiers, especially in big cities like Birmingham and Manchester, and obviously down towards the London clubs as well. It works, so there's no reason why anyone would be against it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's a great it's just a great way to develop players as well. It's not just a case of sending them on loan; you're still looking after them as well. We have got Deborah now with us, so just bear with us while we just bring Deborah in. Thank you very much, Deborah. Are you okay?
Yeah, evening. Apologies for the delay. I completely underestimated the traffic. And also the game didn't kick off on time. It was slightly delayed, so I'd have probably been all right with all things considered. But yeah, my apologies. I'm here now.
No, we're really grateful that you've come on. We really are. We've basically just spoken a little bit about what's next for our devs. But before we carry on with that, Deborah, you was at the game, obviously just coming back. Tell us your thoughts on the actual game first, and then we'll go into a bit more detail away from that.
I've been fortunate enough to watch the Devs play quite a few times this season, and most games have followed a similar pattern in that the team has dominated the game. And actually, you could possibly say the next bit for the actual senior team, not scored the goals they should have done, but still been in control. Today was exactly the same. Admittedly, they were coming into this game with a 3-1 lead from the previous game and away goals counted double. So, yeah, probably quite relaxed. Started well. Then I think concentration is one of the biggest problems for this team because they are head and shoulders above everybody else in the league. And that's not just on the basis of today. That's on the basis of everything I've heard or I've seen myself throughout the season. So I suppose there was a risk of complacency today. That's always the thing that, you've got this 3-1 win, 3-1 scoreline ahead of, behind you. And why not feel confident? But all credit to them. There's a professionalism as well with the team. And yes, you can tell there's still a lot of development to go, but that's the whole point of what they are. They are the development squad, or the under-21s, as they've more recently been called. The game today, they were the better team. They were the better team. And Chelsea, I know it's an under-18s team, but credit to them. They fought today. A couple of players really shone for them. I have to give them credit. The player who scored their goal, she's got a great free kick. She really, I turned to the person behind me and I went, she stood out all game. She deserved that. But focusing on us, there's a good crop of players there. And there's a good crop of players there who aren't all at the top end of the age limit. And that's the really interesting thing. We've got some that are, and we don't know what's going to happen with them next season. But we've got a lot of other good players that are holding their own in that league, in that team, who have still got years ahead of them to develop there.
You've opened up so many conversations there. Thankfully, I've got a few bullet points to kind of tie into what you've just said. You mentioned like the Chelsea goal scorer, but can you just clarify who scored for United? Because I've seen mixed messages on Twitter. So at first I thought it was Carrie Jones. However, Kira Barry, she scored 2, did she?
Yeah. And her second was incredible. It was a solo effort. She's picked up the ball. If I remember correctly, I'm terrible at remembering goals in the moment. I think she's picked up the ball pretty much around the halfway line, and she's just gone down the wing, cut in, got a shot. It was just one of those goals that if it had been scored by a senior player, we'd be raving about it. We'd be purring. We'd be all over it. It's just a shame that, as far as I'm aware, there's no footage of it, because that is a goal. If there'd have only been one goal in the whole of the tie, that would have been the goal that deserved to win it. Obviously, any goal would have done it, but yeah, it was good. It was a great goal. And then Megan Sofield has hit the most beautifully clean strike for the third goal. She's got some talent as well. She's going to be a player I look forward to seeing next season. But no, Kira Barry got 2, and Megan Sofield got the third.
I want to talk a little bit about the structures that you mentioned, Chelsea under-18s, Arrow under-21s, the potential structure change there. So we'll talk a little bit about that shortly. We'll also talk a bit about the Man United Women's Supporters Club in the second half of the show, about how successful that's been this season and your biggest achievements and maybe what we've got planned for the summer. So there's plenty we want to get into. People are mentioning a few names in the comments. It's the usual ones. It's the strikers. The strikers do tend to get a fair bit of hype around them, and I can see why when they're banging as many goals as Maria Edwards and Conner has done this season. Do you just want to touch on those two players, Maria Edwards and Conner Solskjaer?
Yeah, who ironically didn't score today, either of them. Led the line well. They both led the line well, but I think it's a shame, as great as those two are, I think it's a shame that they take so much of the credit and so much of the awareness, because there are so many other really, really outstanding players. We didn't have Rebecca May playing today, and I think that showed. Poppy Lawson came on in the second half. So we've missed her, I think. But I'm touching on Kira Barry. Obviously, she's going to get credit from today. But I've seen players be the standout in other matches. Yes, strikers always get the focus, but they're not able to score the goals if the ball's not getting to them, if we're not able to keep a tight defence. So, yeah, they will always attract, but there's a lot of other players who deserve some credit. And there's a lot of the management team as well. But in terms of on the pitch, yeah, Maria Edwards, Conner, Solskjaer, they're going to get the focus. But I think that would be a shame to ignore the likes of Kira Barry from today's performance. Rebecca May all the way through the season. Anybody who, John, you were at St George's, you saw her score the most amazing goal there. She's been a loss. Carrie Jones. Carrie played an absolutely fantastic match against Everton in the last game of the Northern League a couple of weeks ago. They've all at times been the standout player. But yeah, strikers always get the focus.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask that a second ago when you were talking about Kira Barry, because someone can correct me if I'm wrong here, but it was her and Murphy that were on the bench at Reading. That they were the two that got in the senior team, talking here, Reading away. Those two were the two names that got on the bench for the senior side. And it's interesting when, I think if you asked anyone who follows Man United women, if you said, oh, can you name some of the promising young girls coming through, everyone would say Maria Edwards and Conner Solskjaer. They're the two names that anyone would come up with. Yeah, I know Solskjaer obviously came on earlier on in the season, Bridgewater, but it's names like Kira Barry, it's Niamh Murphy, it's like you said, Rebecca May. It's these players that seem to be getting more of the opportunities maybe with the first team. So just the question I kind of had, I don't know whether this ties into a later conversation, but how far do you think these players are away from this kind of the senior level? Because obviously Carrie Jones has made that at the start of the season in particular. She was heavily involved. But we speak to a lot of players and they say the jump is quite big. But do you think for these players that it's not as big as maybe some fans think, or do you think it is still quite a step up from their level?
Let's also not forget, you're talking about Carrie Jones making the first team. Rebecca May also made the first team pre-COVID. So all credit to her for that. And actually, on the basis of the last few performances, I wouldn't have been upset to see her play for the first team, for the senior team. I guess the big difference tends to be the speed of the game, but also the physicality. Now, I've been impressed by the physicality of this team. They're not afraid to get stuck in. They're not afraid to, just use whatever physical attributes they've got. So if they can hold somebody off, they'll do that. They're not going to just go down every minute. The way we as fans hate seeing players do. There's a toughness to this team. But it's the speed. And it's the quickness of thought, the decision making that very often separates. And we'll see it at times with the first team. Players think they've got longer on the ball, yet we'll go and play Chelsea or the teams above us. I'm not going to name them now, actually, but it's quicker. It's quicker, and it's there's an instinct. They know where each other is. We're still at a stage of a few misplaced passes, a few things that they need longer on the ball. So if you throw them into the first team, and I get that there's a real sense that we want to see these players, we want to see them in the first team. For some people, that's going to be their only chance to see them. But the other side of it is they've still got years in the development squad, so we don't need to rush it. And as the fear for me is very often with young players, if you put them in and they have a nightmare, what damage could that do? I don't know. If we were struggling, and you hear tomorrow night that Ralph's got, is it 14 senior players, and he's got to put in some of the kids on the bench, that's a situation where there is no alternative. Okay, likewise, if you've got a meaningless cup tie, throw some of them in. We're not at that point for the first team. We're not down to bare bones. Maybe centre-back, we struggled at times this season, but I would say that the positions, that the players that could make that leap up, we've not got gaps there. Poppy Lawson was the one that I think somebody else, we were talking about maybe she could have made the jump up, but it's a big ask. That's not to say it can't happen, but I'd also hate them to go into a big game. You think about the fact that we had to throw Diane Caldwell into that Arsenal game. A massive game. Would you have wanted to put Poppy Lawson in that game? We had Saf on the bench because we had no backup keeper. Now, there was no option there. And I think if you have the choice in that kind of a match, there's a reason why Conner got a game against Bridgewater, for example. She's not coming on necessarily against Arsenal. And rightly so. If you don't need to, protect these players.
I think that's just quickly off the back of that. I think that's why this season, because of the gap that obviously got opened up because of City at the start of the season, there's a very fine line between getting the youngsters in, but also Skinner had a job to do this season, as we saw, obviously. And it's still not over yet. We still might get, obviously, into the top three, but it was there, obviously, for us this season. And it's been such a pressure cooker this season around Man United, because every question Skinner's been asked, it's always Champions League, is it on? Have you got that? And there's been a lot going on. So I can kind of see why maybe this season, not that we haven't seen them. Like I said, Reading away, there was 2 on the bench. I know that was kind of forced through injuries as well. We didn't really have too much choice there. There's been every couple of appearances, obviously, last I mentioned Carrier earlier in the season. But yeah, I think this season it's been so on the edge. A lot of our games have been on the edge, with the 1-goal score lines. You got to protect them, haven't you, at the same time.
And the thing I think physically is we've seen senior players go down because physically they can't handle the game. We've had a lot of our senior players struggle. And if they're struggling and they're more used to the physicality of the game, what's that saying for bringing in the youth? We've had 3 players that came in January. I saw the best tweet, which was Skinner's made a mistake because he's got 3 players in January and he can't integrate them into his squad. And I thought, well, Diane Caldwell's been injured. Jade Moore's coming back off a long-term injury, and Brunn's getting injured. But there's a reason for that. There's a reason that these players are struggling with injury. And if they're used to a faster, more physical game and they're breaking down at times, let's not rush these players in. Mm-hmm. We still need to look after them. We still need to protect them physically as well as mentally. It's a massive jump. I don't doubt some of them are good enough. I just think we've got to do it at the right time. Ideally, what we'd have is a Conti Cup group with a couple of games, or at least one game, we could say, right, we'll throw those teams in. We'll throw those players in. Yeah. But, we keep drawing City. We keep drawing Everton. So when are we going to get the games that we throw those players in? It's not who knows? Who knows what will happen next year? After they've put us in a group with one of the Liverpool teams in City, then we'll see who else we get. So, we didn't have. Who else did we have? We had Everton. We had Durham.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, these aren't games you can throw Durham away as well. They're not games you can throw people into. Because then where do you put them? Okay, you've had one game with the first team, now toddle off back to the devs. For me, I think if we throw a player in, there's got to be a progression.
Yeah. Sports Chatterbox actually mentioned the Conti Cup, and it is a shame because we've always said this for 2 or 3 seasons. Even when we get to the FA Cup, we might have one fairly easy tie, and then it's followed by another big tie. So again, it's just such a shame for maybe Mark Skinner, who wants to see these players. He can't, because, as Conor mentioned earlier, he's got too much to lose. He's got to do it gradually, hasn't he?
And you can imagine if he throws some of the kids in and they have a nightmare, he'll be criticised for taking a chance when they're unproven.
Absolutely, yeah. And just on that, just to echo one of your earlier points, it is a massive jump, because it's not we're not just getting them into Man United, who are in the WSL, which is massive enough. We've also looked at progressing ourselves. Now progressing is making top 3. So next season, you're telling me that some of these players who we've just seen today can actually improve our current starting 11 and push us on to that next level. That's what the fans are wanting next season. If we don't get top 3 this season, you can guarantee we'll be pushing for it next season. So even if they do have that ability, what pressure that is on their shoulders, isn't it? It is absolutely massive, and it's not something that I'm a huge fan of just yet, but I would like to see. But as you did mention, Deb, they are still young in their age group as well. So I think that's just us fans really wanted to see more of them. And it would be great to actually see them in a Conti Cup game or the FA Cup games, but it just depends on the teams that we get drawn against. Just before we move on as well, for people who doesn't really know much about the devs and how it kind of works, the league format, do you just want to kind of explain a little bit about the fact that it's divided into 2, North and South, and obviously that's why there's a playoff final, and just that kind of the history of the past season, what they've achieved.
Okay, so much as you've already said that there is a northern and southern division. One of the reasons being that travel for some of these players, hence why a lot of the games people ask, well, why don't they play it at Steve's point, it's the United way. That's the other thing, isn't it? Bringing you through. But to keep the traveling time to a limit, because a lot of these teams won't stay overnight. So the reason why these games kick off sort of 2-3 o'clock very often is so that the traveling team, the away team, can travel to the game, play the game. They can still get home that night. Also, financially, it's not viable to put everybody up in a hotel. But these players, they might have college the next day, some might have school the next day. So, in terms of keeping, one of the reasons will be just to allow the teams to do matches there and back in a day. They don't have the infrastructure. I'm not gloating, but Chelsea have got their own challenges. So for them to have done a hotel for today's game, that wasn't going to happen. So things like that, we've got separate leagues. We've been in the Northern League. I think there's 7 teams. I'll embarrass myself if I don't name them all. I want to say both Liverpool clubs, Villa, Leicester, Birmingham, and I've forgotten somebody. And again, there's games that haven't quite happened in there because of various issues, weather, COVID, postponements. So it's been slightly adjusted, and United won the Northern section a couple of weeks ago, finished off against Everton. And really, it's felt at times as if it's been a bit of a procession, the league for them. They've not won every game, but their goal difference is staggering. They have absolutely piled on the goals, and they've kept it tight at the back. So United have gone through from the Northern Division, Chelsea have gone through from the Southern, and then what happens is you get a 2-legged playoff final effectively. So last Wednesday was played at Cobham, Chelsea's training ground. This week at Altrincham, which is where the development squad play their home games. I know some people ask, why is it not at LSV? I get that. but they've always played at Alty, and that's their home. So I think for me, the bigger thing that would have helped getting people in would have been a later kickoff time, but there was just no capacity to do that.
You did get those names, and you just Leicester.
Did I miss Leicester? In my head, I went through the Midlands clubs. I went through Birmingham, Villa, and I thought Leicester. Didn't say okay.
So that was the ones, yeah. Just before we talk about the Women's Supporters Club, Conor, I'll just bring you in on this one, and Deborah, would be nice to hear your thoughts on it as well. We spoke about the progression of our players now. Just a little bit about maybe like a structure in regards to age groups. And I know that we've discussed it a little bit more, but these are a fantastic group of players, and we're still kind of undecided whether or not they can make it into our senior team, even though they've had all this success this season. There has to be something, a bigger picture here. So Conor, I'm just going to kind of mention it to yourself regarding maybe like different age groups, like under 18s, under 21s, under 23s. Is this something that you'd kind of like to see, like maybe mirror it to the men's team, or can you think of any pros and cons?
I mean, there's advantages to it, but the problem is you need every other team to do the same, because otherwise then it's not beneficial. Like if United did it, that's great, but it's not really beneficial to like for United, because like I said, if everyone else doesn't follow suit and the funding's not across, through the academies throughout the league, you're still playing the same teams because there's not enough teams for you to play in the different age groups. So yeah, I think it's a good idea, but like I said, the funding I don't think will be there across everyone else. So it's unfortunate, and it's like I said at the start of the show, it's unfortunate for some of these girls, because as we've seen today and across the season from people like Deb and other people I've heard that go quite a lot, that some of these players are too good for that league, but they're not quite good enough yet to make the jump. So they're kind of stuck in this weird middle ground where it's like they probably need a loan, but could a loan to a club it's really tough. Loans are difficult enough as it is, because you don't know whether they're going to fit into the system. They might, the manager there might not, fit into the system enough and play them enough for United's liking and all these kinds of things. So loans are difficult. Do you put them in the first team, as you said earlier, John, because we're fighting for top 3 this season, and next season, if we don't get it, even if we do get it, we're going to be in Champions League and what we wanted to really push on then. So it's a real tough one. Yes, I think it's a good thing if you can introduce different segregated age groups. But like I said, if everyone else doesn't follow suit, it's not going to benefit, I don't think.
And I think it's worth saying at this point that United are, to my belief and to my understanding, one of the more, how do I put this now? Proactive's not perhaps the term, but one of the more involved in terms of the different age groups. So they have made the attempt to future-proof their academy for when changes are made. Part of that is the age groups. We see this with the men, though. People flip-flop through different age groups. For anybody that's watched any of the Youth Cup run this year, you'll see some of the names in those teams then go and appear for the under-23s. So we don't have, at 21's level for the women, there's nowhere else. The men, they do have a little bit more leeway. But again, like you say, it's because the other clubs have got that infrastructure. So now the players are stuck, like you say, it's a loan. And the problem with a loan is if you go to some clubs, they might not train more than once or twice a week. So do we need these players to be, this way you get the dual registration issues as well, but do they come back to United for 3 days training a week, let's say, then go to their club for 2 days? And what if they don't play? So we've had players who've gone out on loan and not played that often. You get it in the men's game. Why shouldn't you get it in the women's game? But that will obviously stunt their development. So yes, they're too good for this, but there's no next level. The obvious one for some of these players is to go abroad, and they'll go to the States and they'll go to university there, or college there, sorry, and they'll go and learn a different element of the game there. But I'd love us to be able to keep them and see who progresses, to see who's good enough, because ultimately not everybody will be, but they're stuck now. Some of them are stuck now, and I think that's a real shame.
We're going to move on. We're going to talk a little bit more now about Man United Women's Supporters Club. Kind of, I know you've got a few things that you want to kind of bring in, but if I can just kind of introduce it first. For anyone who's watching who might be like fairly new to women's football or who may not have been around from the start, you may have heard of Barmy Army, Man United Women's Supporters Club. Sorry if I'm bringing it up from the past there, Deb, but I do think there's some new people that may not have been around in the first 3 seasons and who've come in quite recently. Do you just kind of want to explain what the Barmy Army is? Because no doubt people would have heard of the Barmy Army and Women's Supporters Club. Just kind of tell us a little bit about what it's all about.
Okay, so back in the day when we first reformed the team, a group of us would go to join the championship season. We'd basically go to games and just be the noisy lot. And then we realised that there was a capacity, and we became either the self-styled Barmy Army or other people called it us. And that was our name and that was who we were. And I guess over time, it was clear that we could do a bit more than just be the noisy ones who went to games and made complete fools of themselves kind of thing. And actually, we could be a slightly more professional supporters club. We never really knew what we were capable of, and I think we're still learning that. But there came a point around 12 months ago, actually, when we realised that the name, as much as it was an appeal to some, and they wanted that kind of Barmy Army atmosphere, there were other people who perhaps didn't. And what we wanted to do was say, we will always incorporate elements of the Barmy Army. We will always be Barmy Army, but we're also for everybody. And if you want to go to a game and you just want to sit quietly and you want to just keep it to yourself, we are still working as a supporters club. We are still working for you as a fan, whatever your needs and your wants are. So we've never got rid of Barmy Army. And I think I said this to you, both of you in the past, that it's almost like TRA, that we've got the atmosphere section, but we're under a bigger umbrella. And what that allows us to do is really speak for as many fans as possible. We're not just speaking for the loud ones. We're speaking for everybody, whatever your want and your experience. We can put that forward. We recently asked people to complete a survey about the Old Trafford game, for example. Now, wherever you sat for that game, whether you were in J stand with some of us, whether you were sat completely the other side of the ground from us, in the corner of South and near where Stretty End is, your opinion is still valid, and we still want to know what people think. And that's the thing we take to the club. So, yes, some people will always be Barmy Army. There are some people, there will never be anything but Barmy Army. And I get that. And on a good day, so am I. But there's also the slightly more, I suppose, I don't know what the word I'm thinking of here is, but just everybody. We are for everybody. And I think perhaps Barmy Army was it excluded people a bit too much. So we've still kept it, but we've broadened our reach, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. It's good to see just from my point of view this season. Obviously, I only started going this season, but I can see how much it's grown just this season alone from when I first came along at Reading. That kind of leads me on to my first kind of question about it. Just any highlights for you of the season? Obviously, Old Trafford will probably stand out as a big event, but is there anything that maybe people aren't aware of, that stuff that you're really kind of proud of that the Supporters Club has done this season or anything like that?
See, you're now making me check my phone because Andy Slater, who I know you get on sometimes, who does Barmy Article, he asked me to put together a list of things that we'd done as a supporters club.
Yeah.
He did an article on it, really, really cleverly done, actually. And I sent Andy a list, and I'm just going through that list now, and I'm checking what's the one. And actually, what's great is I don't know which the one would be. The Old Trafford game obviously is the feature, but I could rattle them off, and I'm not going to sit here all night and say, well, it's this. Different things will mean different things to different people. We got a cup scheme within an immediate task. The men's side have been asking for that for years. We got it like that. It's that communication, I think, that we have that's been the real bonus and allowed us to do things. So the playlist at Old Trafford. I had a meeting this morning, and we said we want the playlist. We want it at Lee. We've got to have it. Away travel. We've been subsidised since Brighton. Okay, and I know that perhaps, if I tell you that that's a conversation that we have every time we meet with the club, and I know that they were looking into something along those lines for the West Ham game. I don't know the reasons for it not happening, but we all know the location of LSV is not ideal. The problem is the facilities are ideal. If we could pick it up and put it somewhere else, that would suit everybody. But in terms of, we know the numbers are low, we know attendances are low, and we know that that's one of the major factors. And if I could, I'd drive the bus myself if I could. But no, we know it and we keep pushing for it. So in terms of a highlight, for me, I think it's just knowing that we've got that contact and that communication, that we can say, can we do this? Can we have the playlist? Can we get 2 signed shirts? We gave 2 signed shirts away.
Yeah.
Because people couldn't get stuff signed. So we said, you know what, we're going to go and organise this. Like I say, the travel that's been subsidised, I'm rattling them off and I said I wouldn't. There's a podcast with Mark Skinner in there, which was the most bizarre offer we could have got. I guess for us, it's just seeing how we can grow, but also give back. It's not a vanity project, the Supporters Club. And if anybody sees what we do, you'd know that there's not a lot of glory in it most days.
There's a lot of things you can do behind the scenes. And sorry to cut you off, but just to jump on that, there's a lot of things that's done behind the scenes that, because it's not on YouTube like us, or because you can't put everything on Twitter because you have to obviously be very mindful. There's so many phone calls and emails that go on behind the scenes that people watching this haven't got a clue about. And sorry, Deb.
Absolutely. One of the things that consistently is the flags. People assume the flags will always be at games, but what they forget is that it means we have to arrive 2 hours before a home game because there's only a certain window we can put them up. It means we then take them all down again. It means we bring them home and we wash them. And it's that kind of stuff that when it appears, people just see the end product. And sometimes I actually said the Old Trafford game was the first home game in years that I'd turned up to. And then I'd gone home afterwards, and it was great. I hadn't done that for years because we'd had the flags. It's a behind the scenes thing, and sometimes it's a lot of hassle. The Chelsea away allocation, I spent sort of a day and a bit on my phone, constantly going, "Where is it? What's happening? Are we doing this, or have I just got to tell people to buy anywhere?" So things like that can be. But then you get those moments, and you think, "Yeah." What I will say is that the stuff that happens doesn't happen by accident. And sometimes it can take as little as can we get this email? Other times it's days and days, weeks. The request list we put in for things for the Old Trafford game, that was months of work. Things don't just happen by accident. There's often a lot of stuff that goes in, but it's not a vanity project by any means. So when we do get the wins, we celebrate them, but we tend to celebrate them within ourselves.
100%. Sorry, John, I know you want to just quickly jump back in, but I just want to, obviously, as we know now from obviously Stourbridge as well, doing 4 flags is a lot, and you see how many that Man United have. It's I think like you just said there, people do maybe take it. I do sometimes when I just turn up and I see them, and I don't know what I think, to be honest, but a lot of people probably just think, well, yeah, there's flag. But like you said, you've got to get there so many hours before to get all that ready. There are people that have to do that to have them there. And I think some people, including myself, do take that for granted when you just turn up at a game and see them, because we see them week in, week out. It's only at away games because we're all there kind of together. We see you actually physically putting them up a lot of the time. At LSV, it's a little bit different because obviously you're there so early, but yeah, like I said, we know from just doing 4 that it's
and last year during COVID was a nightmare because because the team was still training there. We were only allowed to go on a Thursday morning because that's their day off. Now at this point, I was back in work, but it's too much of a job for one person. So there may have been a few late starts on Thursdays, but we were completely jammed. There was no way around it. And it wasn't one of those things we could say, oh, can we do it a different day? Or, oh, can we do it a different time? Or can somebody else do it? It had to be done. And there are elements of what you'll have this, you've got to come up with a show. You've got to find a guest. some things just have to be done. And yeah, the flags look great, and I love when there are photos that are put out on official channels and it's a player in front of the flags or just them flying. It looks great. I love it. And then you realize what it takes to get them there. But I think they were really symbolic during COVID. I think it was the one way to say we were there. And it was huge that we got every one of them in to Old Trafford this year. But yeah, it's one of those things. It needs to be done. I don't think we could ever go back to not having them now.
100%. Sorry, John. I know you want to jump in the
on,
question, but just quickly one more thing on the flags, and I'm kind of taking it. But one of my favourite pictures actually is the one that's just come out. MUFC Flags and Banners put it out. It was the one from Villa away,
Yes.
and you've got kind of all of us kind of stood up in the away end, and you've got all the flags across the bottom. That's one of my favourite pictures of the season. I know people have all the, but you've got kind of the supporters club flags and the Army flags along the bottom. You've got all of us stood at the back. That just sums up us following United Women this season.
Yeah,
that is us in a picture right there. So yeah. I love that. I'm so glad somebody stuck that on, and it got retweeted around. So yeah,
it deserved to be.
Just before we talk about the buses that we have running as well, I just wanted to just come in on something that you kind of said as well. Just at Old Trafford, there was a lot of work behind the scenes, because it's not just a case of we just turned up and all stood together. You started planning this back in October, November, sending those original messages to us saying, who would like to be in a separate area, getting all our numbers together and making those phone calls. Then obviously you mentioned the flags, the songs over the tunnel. We know that's not easy because we've been trying for that for like 3.5 years. Again, that was a success. The whole day was a success. But I just wanted to reiterate that because I had that as a bullet point. So I just wanted to mention it myself. There's so many little successes in the whole of that day that, as you said, Deb, people only see that end product, but there's so much work that's gone into that, wasn't there?
And the difficulty with a lot of that, as an example, is that we knew when that match was going to be. We knew that match months in advance. I'd been to a meeting with John Murter back in June with Mark, who acts as our secretary. And we'd seen the mythical 3-year plan. And John's flicking through it. On one of the pages is a timeline. And we saw when the game was going to be. And we nudge each other like, aye, we know it now. Fixture list comes out. We go, yeah, that's the game. Can't say anything. So all we could do was hypothetically say, what's the situation with you all? Do you want to come and stand with us if we can get a section? And then at one point we were going to be given where TRA are, because the roof's slightly lower, so the acoustics are better. And actually it was a bit of a surprise when we got Jay. And I'm really glad we did, because I think either TRA or Jay would have been great. But I think for us to have a standing section, an official standing section, was massive. And I thank the club for doing that. But we can only ask these questions in private and say, well, what would you do if hypothetically this happened? Now, obviously, next season, it's dead easy. We just go to everybody and say, when there's a game at Old Trafford, do you want to be in J stand with us? Or do you want to be where we are? It's easier. But it was massive on a personal level. I loved it. I was so excited about being in that section. I'd have loved more numbers. I'd have loved the noise to have carried more. But that's something we're going to build on. This, I was told on the Wednesday at Media Day that there was a suggestion that I wasn't going to be in J stand. And I actually had my name put down for somewhere else. And my name was taken down very quickly. Because as somebody said, you're a fan. You don't want to be in there. Now, I'll let you all decide where I was put. But that's the truth. Because I am a fan. Whatever else I do, I am a United fan. And I wanted to be with everybody else. And I wanted to be part of that atmosphere with you. And I just remember thinking, we've not fought for this, for me to go, see you folks. I've got a better offer. I've got a heated seat over there. And honestly, I wouldn't have enjoyed it. I'd had to sit on my hands. It wouldn't have been the same. Couldn't have done it. So the other thing as well, we're fans. I'm a fan. And I want the same as everybody else sometimes. So that game Symbolically, it was huge. And I will openly admit that when Everton scored, there was a part of me that went, this is too big an occasion for me as well. I felt overawed by it. We'd had a busy week. We'd had a media day on the Wednesday. There'd been an event at Old Trafford on the Friday I'd been invited to. It was a big week. And I thought, if I'm feeling it, they're going to be feeling it. So next season, it'll all be easier. We'll be fine. Whenever the game is, because I genuinely, that one is up for grabs at this stage, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, just quickly, John, it's an interesting point actually on the whole J stands and the Stretford thing, because I know there was a few questions as to why we weren't where TRA were. Now, I know TRA obviously have got the link with the club as well in the way that they do things, but that is technically not an official standing zone if you're there, and because there's not the railed kind of seating that is in J stands, so I can see why it was in a proper standing section rather than in the TRA. So I know, for example, for the Youth Cup final, the TRA, where I'll be back in there for the Youth Cup final, that's going to be back in its normal place above the tunnel and kind of W207 to 4 or so, wherever it is behind Stretford and lower. So yeah, it's but it didn't take away from the atmosphere. Just quickly on the Old Trafford thing, it, like you said, I wish it would have carried a little bit more around. I think it did to start with. The usual. So obviously the songs are slightly different in the women's game, but the usual Old Trafford songs, I call them, that carried, I think, for the first couple of minutes when the players were coming out and everything else. But at the end of the day, they're the same chants to an extent, but they're slightly adapted some of the other ones. But I still didn't think the fact of the seating position where we were, it didn't take away from the atmosphere. I don't think.
No, I think for me, when J's full, like when TRA's full, that noise carries on a full stadium. I know it wasn't a full stadium, but for me, I'd have just loved more noise. Always. I know that there were some people, because I worked with some people who were in South Stand, and I said, oh, did you see the noisy people over in the corner? Yeah, we couldn't hear you. And that's the thing for me, that I'd just like that to have carried more. But that's my personal thing. And it will grow. There's a couple of great pictures that were put out of us, of our section. And what I'm looking forward to is in 3, 5, 10 years' time, when somebody else is doing my role, looking back at those pictures and seeing the version of them then and see how it's grown. Because it will grow, and that atmosphere section will grow. Because that atmosphere section was bigger in March than it would have been in September. And that's just in the space of a season. So if we can keep that going, if we can get more and more people, I'm looking forward to seeing that, the before and after, effectively. Whilst I'm really proud of what we've got now, I want it to grow.
You've just pretty much mentioned my next point about, like, at LSV, obviously you were there from that first season where you might have had the back row or the back 2 rows. You now look at how many people are standing up. It's about a third of that block. And I can pretty much say that probably by next season, it'll be half of that block, if not more.
And so much, so much that we've had to actually negotiate a way that can happen from a safety perspective. When it was just a dozen of us, it wasn't a consideration. Now it is, because there's so many more. Yeah. And as much as those are the conversations that can sometimes get under my skin, they're the ones that are great to have, because you're going in the right direction. When we've got this rule at about, was it 12 to a row? There's a reason for that. Yeah.
I agree.
Look, I say this every time that the Premier League fixtures come out. Some of those fixtures aren't. I know that there's this computer that has to work out. Both Manchester clubs can't be at home on the same day. This one, some of those games are too convenient. Okay, you end up with like United, Chelsea. I think in the past we've had like the Liverpool derby and the Manchester derby on the same Sunday. That's not coincidence. Come on. So do I expect that there'll be something?
Anfield, Liverpool's first time back up here. I can imagine it being the games Anfield, 100%.
Do you know the best thing is they'll sell more tickets than Everton did and bring a bit of atmosphere, I dare say. So let's bring it on. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. I would love to go to Anfield and
you can just picture
the attendance naturally.
First game of the season for Liverpool will be at Anfield. It'll be against United. You just know these fixtures, but that will be good. I think that it will help grow. Not that it should need that boost. You want people to want to go for the right, just to be consistent. But that would definitely be an occasion at Old Trafford or at Anfield. I think that would help help boost the numbers as well,
Yeah.
and help get new fans engaged in the women's side as well.
Yeah, definitely. People have just got to come through the door. Some people won't go again. Some might. You got to get people through the door. You got to try it.
I am conscious of time, but I don't want to skip over the last topic, Deb. It's the buses that we run. So I think we've been on a few at the start of the season. It's mainly away days. It's only away days, isn't it? We've got one coming up for the Chelsea game. But Deb, if you just want to kind of talk a little bit about, because we have had a bit of a success this season as well, where the club have actually put a bit of money towards one of the buses as well. But do you just want to talk a little bit about the buses?
Absolutely. It was really one of the things that we, back in the day of being Barmy Army, going back to that conversation, we organised minibuses. We were fortunate enough at that stage to have somebody who could drive a 17-seater, and we would take a 9-seater, a 17-seater, both ideally. We fill those buses and we'd rock up at away grounds, make noise, win the game, go home kind of thing. We unfortunately don't have Napi able to drive, and God bless him. I hope he's well. So our options for travel were really limited. And it ultimately came to a point where coach travel had to be considered. Coach travel is expensive, okay? And we're not yet at a point where we can fill a bus. So we spoke to the club, we explained the situation. And we're also really aware that other clubs, not just in the Super League, but also in the Championship, do get subsidies from their clubs. And it's one of the things that's accepted as the norm or quite acceptable, whichever way you want to say it. The Brighton bus was the first one that we were subsidised for. And I will always acknowledge that we had support within the club for that. I won't name the people, but there was a lot of support from certain quarters to get us to these games. We've been very pleased to say that that's a situation that's carried on all season. For any times we've offered a bus, we don't offer buses for every game, just because it's not viable financially. So we've got I'm told that the Chelsea bus, last one of the season, we've got maybe half a dozen seats remaining. And if anybody wants to book on, if they go to the MUWSC travel account, you can contact us that way. I think it's £25 for adults, 20 for concessions. There is a pickup in the Midlands as well. So we'd leave from Manchester. We leave from near Old Trafford. I think we're on a 5:45 departure. I think pickup in the Midlands is around 7:30. We'll even drop you back in the Midlands as well at the same place. So, I mean, it's a full day. It is a full day. There's obviously going to be a stop on the way for refreshments, toilet break, that kind of thing. And if you want to support the team, that's one of the ways to do it. There are some people who don't do buses. We get that. There are some people, it's the only way they can get to games. And it's another thing that the supporters club do. We try and get people to games. So it's not always the easiest thing you might see us saying, we've still got seats. Come on, we've still got seats. We just want to get as many people to the game as possible. But there are not many, but yeah, I think we've sold quite a few for Chelsea, but there are still some seats left. If anybody's interested, then please get in touch.
It's definitely... Go on, John.
Just very quickly, it's not just travel, it's part of the days, isn't it? You know, we talk about away days. It's not away games, it's away days. And you know, me and Conor, we go up together now pretty much every game with Andrew Ward, and that's part of the journey, stopping off at the petrol garage, having your breakfast, you know, the conversations going up there with your mates. Obviously, you can just imagine what the Barbie bus is, you know, with all the things, you know, and everyone together. But yeah, like I was going to say, it's not just travel, it's a lot more than that.
Sometimes the game's the least important bit. In some ways, it's the conversation. And a lot of people have said they really just they prefer away games to home games because the day lasts longer. So, yeah, it's a long day. I know it's a long day and it's a very early start, but it's what football fans do.
Yeah, I definitely prefer aways to homes for other reasons because but it's no, on the but especially for Chelsea, obviously being the last game of the season. Obviously, there'll be more next season as well for all the aways then as well. But just for Chelsea, because I had a lot of people come to me saying, "Oh, well, I can get a ticket. It's not the problem. It's getting there that's the problem." And that's where I said, "Well, there is your Manchester way. You may as well get a book because obviously I think my car is going to be full from where I am." But that's why I said to them and forward them onto you guys. But because especially for Chelsea on the last day, I know a lot of people think the top three is over. I'm not quite sure where I stand on it at the moment. But can you imagine like missing that and we do get it on the last day? Reading go and beat City and we're all there and that we're just checking our phones, keeping an eye on that score. I've got that running in my head that we're beating Chelsea and we're just checking the Reading City score.
I'd just settle for the beating Chelsea bit right now.
Yeah. Spoil their party. Yeah,
but people aren't going to want to miss that, so it's the ideal.
And it's the last game of the season. It's a long time until September when the season starts again. I know some people will be going to Euros games, but this is it. This is it for June, July, August. This is 4 months worth. So yeah, if you can make it wherever you're going from, your support will always be appreciated.
You've mentioned the supporters, the supporters travel bus Twitter page, but how else can people contact you, Deb?
Okay, if they want to contact me personally through Twitter, so it's at Deborah Henry. That's probably where I'm most active. In terms of the supporters club at MUW_SC. I'm being prompted. Likewise, the travel accounts MUW_SC travel. Yep. Got that one. We're also on Instagram. We're now on TikTok.
Yes.
I'm still learning it. I think I'm about 25 years too old for it. So yeah, we try and cover as much as we can. There's a website, the MUWSC website, if anybody wants to send us a message via that, but also at games. We always say it. Just come and say hello. Come and ask me anything. If I can't help you with something, I'll try and direct you to somebody that can. If it's something we've got to go back to the club with, we'll do that. We'll let them know. But yeah, Twitter's my personal main way of contact. If somebody can't get to me personally, then yeah, go for that.
And just about becoming a member as well. Is that the same way? Can they get in touch with you through the Twitter page if people want to become members? Yeah,
I can do. Like the other forms as well. If you actually go onto the MUWSC Twitter account, I think there's a link off there to the website. There's something off there that you can then fill out a form. Yeah. And if anybody struggles, just drop us a DM and we tend to reply and say, just do this or send us this or whatever. But yeah, membership. We've got two types of membership. We've got the plus and the free membership. Plus memberships are season to season, whereas free membership just tends to run. So anybody who's a plus member right now will be getting a reminder soon that if they want to, they can renew. And that gives people a priority window onto the booking window onto the bus. You get money off our Teespring store and you get an enamel badge for it, which I've got a nice one here. So that's, I don't think that'll be seen too well, but there we go there. So that's your member badge. So just any questions. Honestly, if anybody just wants to get in touch, just drop us a line about absolutely anything. If people want to help, that's another thing. If people have got some skill or some talent or some knowledge, or if you just want to be a pair of helping hands, we'd really appreciate it. We'll never refuse any help.
Kind of, I can see that you've unmuted yourself, so I just kind of leave the end of the show to yourself. Just some of the things that you've heard in that last half an hour. You just want to kind of
that's pressure. That is. Just drop me on the spot there. Go on, end the show, Connor. You you deal with that. No, I just and obviously into next season, get as many members as you can. I've got a few people that came to the Old Trafford game that will have. I think one's bought a season ticket and the other two will get a seat. I'm hoping they'll buy the season ticket in time where we are, and obviously they'll become members as well. There's no downside to it, in my opinion. Like you said, you get a little funky badge. I've still not decided. I take mine with me to games, but I have it in my pocket because I never know. Because I wear different shirts at games, I don't know which one to. But anyway, yeah, I always take them with me anyway. So yeah, you get that, and like you said, all the benefits, and just it's good to have. Especially as obviously at the moment with the size of the women's team and the women's game, it's good to have that connection obviously with you guys and have that communication, because like you said, with Chelsea away was a good example of that. You know, I think I was texting you and I was in the Discord and I was like, what's going on? Like, I don't, because I was panicking that because every area had sold out, I think, or was selling out. And I was like,
I was there.
I want to buy.
Yep. Honestly, the Tuesday night, I remember I said to Mark, I said, I think I've just got to tell people to buy it. And I thought, and I was saying, how long do we wait? What if they sell out and we've never had this out? And I'm being told it's promised. I'm being told it's sorted. And God bless the woman in the ticket office on our side for trying to deal with a men's ballot. I think it was the night of the Liverpool game. There were so many other things. She was the only one because somebody else was off. And she's like, I've got the information. I just can't do it. I'm like, no, that's fine. You've got the information. It's happening. I get that fear completely because that's where I was. And obviously I felt that responsibility. But I always say the more members, the stronger of collective voice. Because if I go to the club and I say, I've got 2 people, 2 members, and they want this, or I say we've got 200 members, that voice carries. And we've got more chance of getting what we're asking for, or we've got more chance of making an impact the bigger we are. And I mean, you're talking about the paid membership, the free membership as well. Anybody, just take a punt, come and join us. And you can join us on our Discord as well, which we try and keep people updated with things on there as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much for joining us, Deb. Hopefully you'll join us again over the summer.
My apologies for the delay. Yeah, sorry for the delay in arriving, but yeah, thanks for that, guys.
Thank you very much. We shall see you again. We're back on tomorrow with Connor, me, you, and Anthony. And then we've obviously got the usual Friday Night Fans Forum, Saturday Night Live, and then, of course, Match Day content on Sunday. So plenty to keep your eyes open for. And I can't wait. I'm looking forward to our last home game of the season. So we shall see you all there. Thank you for joining us in the comments, and we shall see you again soon. Thank you, guys.